missile firings, Iron Dome shields, and nightly clashes in Gaza had captured international attention. Indian eyes too were glued to the happenings in Gaza. Supportive messages for both Israel and Palestine had flooded the social media space. Twitter hashtags like India stands with Palestine, India stands with Israel had flooded the social media state. Why were the people so divided in taking sides in this conflict? And who does India really stand with here? Before that, let us understand what the conflict is all about. So this is the current state of the territory. This area is the undisputed territory under the rule of Israel. This area today called Gaza and this area was earlier under the control of Israel. Today there are two organizations. This Palestinian Liberation Organization has control over this orange area over West Bank, and this another group called Hamas has control over this territory, Gaza. So this group called Hamas is deemed to be a terrorist organization by many countries, including Israel. So the current clash is between this organization Hamas and the civilian government in Israel. So Israel claims that it is acting in self-defense against the terrorist attacks, and Palestinians in Gaza are saying that they are suffering due to Israeli actions. Many countries have shown support for one side or the other. What is India's stance on these Gaza clashes? We know that the public opinion is divided between both Palestine and Israel. India has shown over social media support for both these countries. But what is the official stance of the government of India? India refused to take sides and has called upon both sides to de-escalate and resume direct dialogue. India has expressed strong support for the just Palestinian cause while also criticizing Hamas' rocket fire against Israel. So, it in a way has taken a balanced approach. It has taken the Palestinian side also by showing support for the Palestinian cause, and it has taken the side of Israel also by criticizing the actions of Hamas. India has reiterated its commitment to the two-nation, two-state solution for the conflict. This two-state solution was first proposed after UN Resolution 181, about which we studied in a separate video. So, India still stands committed to this two-state solution for the conflict. India's this stance is in line with its de-hyphenation policy. Under this de-hyphenation policy, India maintains an independent relationship with both the countries irrespective of the conflict between these two countries. Recently, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has thanked 25 countries for their resolute support with Israel. India is not one of these countries. Does this mean that Israel is angry with India? For this, let us understand how are India and Israel relations historically. So, how are these relations historically? India's close relations with Israel are said to be the worst kept secret. It has been said that India has treated Israel as its mistress. It keeps the relationship in closet. This is Israel and this is an Indian Prime Minister. So this is how India-Israel relationship is. They maintain a backdoor relationship, but that does not come out in the open very often. But it is a worst kept secret. Everybody knows that it is Israel that India is standing with. India did not establish full diplomatic relations with Israel till the year 1992. This was despite Israel's continuous support to India on the Kashmir issue. Israel has always stood with India in its wars against Pakistan Also, it has contributed immensely towards India's defense sector. So, despite all of this, the relationships remain in a back door and they do not come out in the open. So, despite no official diplomatic relationships, both the country kept collaborating behind the scenes. Now, the unveiling of India-Israel relations can be traced to the year 1992. It is this year that India established full diplomatic relations with Israel. The Indian embassy was finally opened in Tel Aviv, the capital of Israel. In 2017, Prime Minister Modi became the first Indian Prime Minister to visit Israel. So, although the relations with Israel have remained same throughout, but it was only of late it is said that the relationships are now more accepted in the open. In 2015 and 16, India abstained from voting against Israel in the United Nations Human Rights Council. So, this was seen as a pro-Israeli gesture. India-Israel have cooperation in defense that we all have seen, then in agriculture, space. Too, they share close relations and they share a $5 billion bilateral trade. But none of this has affected India's relations with Palestine. Although India-Israel have a very good defense partnership. India-Israel are said to be a marriage made in heaven. But Palestine is called to be India's wife, where on all official forums, India always supports Palestine, while the real relations are always established with Israel. Israel Defense Ministry and the Indian taxpayer benefit each other mutually. How does India treat Palestine? India is the only Arab country that voted against the creation of Israel in 1948 when the UN Resolution 181 came. India was against the creation of Israel. It was only after 3 years under international pressure that India had to accept the two-nation theory, but it has always stood by this two-state solution thereafter. India lashed out on Israel in 1967 after the preemptive war, the Six-Day War, and after the 1973 Yom Kippur War. In 1975, India became the first non-Arab country to recognize the Palestinian Liberation Organization as the sole representative of Palestinians. That is why it is said that India tries to be more Arab than even the Arabic countries. India voted in favor of Palestine to become the first full member of UNESCO in 2011. Then, India co-sponsored the UN resolution that enabled Palestine to become an observer member of the UN without any voting rights. Why India does so? Why does it maintain backstage relations with Israel and treats it like a mistress while it has good relations with Palestine also? And what guides India's foreign policy towards Israel? Let us see. Foreign policies and relations are always guided by one thing, and that is national interest. Whichever party is in power, be it the BJP or the NDA, a mature nation needs to display continuity in its foreign policy. And India has always maintained this continuity in the form of de-hyphenated policy with both Israel and Palestine of late. India's stance on the Israel-Palestine issue is based on two major determinants. These are, first is the India's interest in the Gulf. From an energy security point of view, Gulf is very important. It is a very oil-rich region and India is dependent on Gulf for its oil imports, for the crude oil. Gulf cannot be neglected from an energy security point of view. Trade interconnectedness with the Gulf is also far greater than what it is with Israel. UAE is the second largest trading partner of India after the USA in terms of exports. Also, the support of various Arab countries at UNSC for India's permanent membership quest is very crucial. Then comes the second major determinant, and that is a domestic determinant. The sentiments of Indian Muslims towards the Palestinian cause also guides India's relationship with Israel. There are domestic repercussions when India becomes too much pro-Israel without considering the Palestinian cause. So, all this has to be kept in mind while formulating your foreign policy. Domestic interest and national interest are the foremost determinant in any foreign policy. So that is why there is a saying in international media that on all official forums, India would always stand with Palestine, whatever the backstage relations with Israel are. So the current stance of India is also in line with its foreign policy. India maintains a balancing act between both these warring parties. India has a de-hyphenated approach where it tries to maintain relations with both the countries, be it Israel or be it Palestine. So the current stance is in nowhere a deviation from its foreign policy, and Israel also understands the same. I hope you've understood the geopolitics of the region. Happy learning!
To have more such discussions and analysis, subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon for notifications on our upcoming videos.